YouTube, what a YouTube down home news TV. I am Dre, and as you can see, I got a new little format. Trying to pick the best place to do videos. Got a little more light because the room in here is a little smaller, but let's get into this article that I stumbled upon. It's coming from NBC News. A Georgia county that once expelled all black residents now wants to be a model of love. And then a photo in the description that says teenagers Oscar Daniels seated second from the left, Ernest Knox seated Forsyth County, Georgia. Photo was taken in 1912. That's some good photography back then, huh? Coming GA when Durham Sneed moved to Forsyth County, Georgia in 1989. He was struck by the lack of diversity in the region, just 30 miles north of Atlanta. It was a pretty much completely white county, said Sneed, who is a white and was a pastor at the time. According to the 1990 census of the 44,083 people who live in Forsyth County, 43,573 were white, close to 99%, and just 14 were black. Golly. 14 were black? It was a place, Sneed said, where generations of families typically lived their entire lives. It was also a place with a deep and complex history of racial violence. In 1912, a small population of black residents, dozens of whom were land and business owners, were violently expelled from the county, their livelihood stripped from them. 3 black men were lynched, and the remaining black residents were ordered to leave and told never to return. I mean, living in 2024, that seems far-fetched, but that's crazy. That is crazy. For many black Georgians, even those unaware of the details of that incident, it's universally understood to generally avoid the county. The history of Forsyth County is literally a case study of racism in American history, said Nafisa H. Muhammad, an associate professor of the history at Spelman College in Atlanta. The fact that most black people do not know about Forsyth's history or are told to stay away ironically perpetuates social segregation and delays rectification. For more than a century later, one-third of Forsyth's residents are non-white, but less than 5% of the county is black, a figure that's been stagnant for decades. Yet the numbers alone, some residents say, don't tell the full story of the present-day Forsyth County. A key chapter in the story is an attempt by Sneed and a group of pastors to reshape the county's history by establishing a college scholarship program in 2022 for descendants of black families who were violently expelled 110 years before. The founders are clear that the scholarships are not reparations, a word many in the community would consider divisive, but instead an act of love, an acknowledgement of past harms and hope of fostering a positive path forward. Forsyth Day of racial terror. In 1912, Forsyth County was home to about 12,000 residents, including 1,098 black people scattered throughout the county. But that September, an 18-year-old white woman named May Crow was brutally assaulted, bloodied, and left unconscious in a wooded area. And let me guess who they blamed. She eventually died from her injuries, and 3 young black men, the only black people in the part of the county at the time, were accused of killing her, with little evidence other than a coerced confession from one of them. One of the men, 24-year-old Rob Edwards, was arrested and jailed only to be dragged from his cell the following day by a mob of angry white residents. He was allegedly hitched to the back of a wagon with a noose around his neck, driven to the downtown square in Cumming, and hung from a telephone pole as onlookers took turns riddling his lifeless body with bullets. Oh my goodness. Two black teens, Ernest Knox, 16-year-old. Two black teens, Ernest Knox, 16, and Oscar Daniel, 18, were also hanged after one-day trials. The other black residents of the county were threatened with death if they did not leave, as night riders posted letters warning of impending terror. Within 3 weeks, the black population of Forsyth ceased to exist. Many were forced to leave everything they had worked hard to attain behind without anything in return. Still, racial animus and violence was not confined to 1912. As residents enforced a ban on black residents, a group of black children and their counselors went camping at Lake Lanier in Forsyth in 1968. After sundown, a group of white men reportedly surrounded them, yelling racial slurs until they left. In 1980, a black firefighter was shot in the head after nightfall by two white men while attending a company picnic. What does that say? A placard marks the area where Rob Edwards was lynched by a mob as part of racist terror campaign to expel black people from Forsyth County in 1912. Much of this history was buried in newspaper clippings until a civil rights march was met by a KKK march in 1987. Oprah Winfrey brought national attention to the area that year, highlighting the county where no black person had lived for 75 years. In 2016, author and former county representative Patrick Phillips published Blood at the Root, A Racial Cleansing in America, which chronicled the 1912 expulsion and how, despite thousands of witnesses to the lynchings of the three men, no one was ever held accountable for their deaths. Because of this, Phillips said he believes the harm was never truly ended. The effects of the 1912 expulsions are not over, not buried in the past, but ongoing, as African American descendants continue to lose out on all the suburban wealth generation, and as the perpetrators' descendants continue to profit from it, he said. Change in Forsyth. Since Winfrey came to Forsyth, change has been slow but steady, according to Sneed. Population growth over the last 30 years has introduced Asian and Hispanic Americans to the region, as well as new cuisines and customs. Sneed said this shift has allowed a market shift in mindset and how to talk about the past. I'm encouraged by how many people are really embracing the discussion and realizing that truth is a good thing, he said, while acknowledging that not everyone is ready for change in the same way. We all want to live in peace and prosperity, for our children to have a better life and live in safety. But people have different ideas of how you get to that, he said. A historical marker erected in 2021 now sits downtown Cummings where Edwards was hanged, acknowledging what took place there over a century ago. A new elementary school named New Hope opened up in 2022, honoring more than a dozen former African American schools in the region. A group of volunteers restored Talbot Street Cemetery, the site of an African American burial ground and Methodist church established in 1871. Phillips sees these developments as laudable steps toward progress. Still, he says more can be done. There is still much that has been left undone, like teaching the county's real history to local students, and making sure that the next generation of Forsyth residents understand what once happened in the place they call home, he said. But above all, there has been no formal public apology and no attempt to repair the economic harm done to those families whose fortunes were forever changed in 1912. K, K through 12 students across Georgia learn state and local history, but there is no explicit mention of the 1912 expulsion on Forsyth's education website. A spokesperson for the school districts did say, however, that students have access to local resources about the expulsion. I'm not going to get into it. Anyway, continuing on. Josh Bird, whose own family was a part of the expulsion, moved to Forsyth 6 years ago, much to the chagrin of friends and family who warned him about the county's fraught history. There is a change that is taking place, he said, adding, "It's not the Forsyth you've heard of." Choosing to form his own opinion about Forsyth today, Bird opened a barbershop in the county 2 years ago. Speaking at his year's scholarship event, Bird has now become a de facto ambassador, encouraging other descendants to move back and change the narrative. I had to ultimately make a decision here, he said. Am I going to operate in fear, or am I going to trust the word of the people that I trust that are saying, hey man, this is different? Snead acknowledges that decades of injustice won't be reversed in a few years, but doing something, he says, is better than doing nothing at all. This is not fixing anything. This is not justice, he said. A bigger vision I have is for the county that was called the most racist in America in 1987. The dream is for it to be called the county that's known all over the world as a county of love. Oh, that's interesting. Interesting topic, story. I love history. I love learning new things. But going back to when I was in high school, I went to a predominantly white school, elementary. Well, I was a military brat, but we finally moved down here in 1996. And my middle school, it was me and maybe three other black guys at the school. When I went to high school, it was more diverse, but predominantly white. I'd say 90% white, 7% black, and 3% others, just based off of what I remember. But today it's really diverse. I would honestly say it's probably not an even ratio black to white, but I'd say blacks are at least 35 to 40%. Maybe not that high because we've expanded a lot, but from what I've seen at the school, because my nephew goes to the same school I went to, it's more diverse. I can say that there's a lot more people of color there, and that includes Asians, other ethnicities. But yeah, that's a real interesting story. Maybe one day I'll have one of my relatives that grew up in Natchez, Mississippi. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that place. But it's a lot different from where we're at now. It's more urban, I guess you would say. It's more modernized. But Natchez, it's when I go back to Natchez to visit my family, my grandparents, grandma, feels like I'm time traveling a little bit. The biggest attraction I would say they have in their city is, I mean, other than the outdoors type things like the Natchez Trace. They got a lot of historical landmarks, but as far as the city, county, Adams County, the best attraction from what I've seen that I would enjoy going to is a Walmart. But I've been to a lot of the historical sites. But yeah, maybe I have one of my relatives come on and talk about their upbringing. And my dad said when he was growing up, he had to, what do you have to pick? They picked, it wasn't cotton, soybeans, maybe some type of beans. That's how he got paid when he was in his younger age, up until he was able to actually go out and get a job somewhere. But yeah, I honestly don't take for granted what previous generations had to go through for us to be where we're at today as black people. And short story, and I'm in this video, but when I was in high school, the way blacks and white got along, I honestly thought that racism would be over through our generation. But that's just a young mind at the time until life actually struck me once I got older. But it is what it is. It be what it be. Down Home News TV. I'm Dre. Y'all have